You live in a world where the idea of Rome has never truly died. You feel it in the way people speak about power, in the way rulers carry themselves, in the way authority is understood across Europe. And at the center of it all, there is one figure who stands above every king you have ever heard of. The Holy Roman Emperor is not just another ruler. To you, and to everyone around you, he is the living continuation of something ancient and almost sacred. You grow up hearing that this empire has endured for more than 1,000 years. It traces its roots back to Charlemagne, and beyond him, to the memory of the Roman Empire itself. This is not just history to you. It feels like a chain that has never been broken. When the emperor is crowned by the Pope, it is not seen as a political event alone. It feels like something ordained, something that connects heaven, Rome, and your present world into a single line of authority. When you look at Europe, you do not see equal nations competing. You see a hierarchy that feels natural. Kings rule their lands, but the emperor stands above them in status and meaning. Even powerful kingdoms like France or Spain exist alongside this greater idea. The emperor is not always stronger in armies or wealth, but he carries something else that no one else truly has. He represents a universal order that stretches beyond borders. You live inside that order, even if you do not always notice it. The empire is not a single, unified country in the way people might expect. It is a vast and intricate system made up of hundreds of territories, free cities, principalities, and church lands. It should not work as well as it does, and yet it holds together. Disputes are brought before imperial courts. Decisions are debated in the Reichstag. Messages and news travel through an organized postal network that connects distant regions into a shared space. Because of this, life inside the empire feels strangely stable. You may live far from Vienna, far from the emperor himself, but you still feel that you belong to something larger. There is a structure above local conflicts, a legal order that people recognize, and a sense that, somehow, this system keeps the peace across a fragmented land. What makes it powerful is not the constant presence of armies marching across fields. It is the belief that this order is real, that it has legitimacy, that it has always been there and will continue to exist. And without fully realizing it, you begin to take that for granted. At first, you do not see the change clearly. Nothing dramatic happens all at once. The ceremonies still take place, the titles still exist. The language of empire still sounds the same, but slowly, almost quietly, something begins to feel different. You start to notice that the world outside the empire is changing in a way that does not include it anymore. New powers are rising, and they do not think the way your world does. In places like France and England, rulers no longer accept the idea that there is a higher authority above them. They govern their lands as fully independent states, and they expect others to recognize that independence. The idea of a universal empire that stands above all kingdoms begins to feel outdated in their eyes. You hear about the devastation of the 30 Years' War, and even if you did not witness it yourself, its consequences shape everything around you. The war was not just destruction. It changed the balance of power inside the empire. When the Peace of Westphalia is agreed, something fundamental shifts. The emperor is no longer the unquestioned center of authority. The princes gain more control over their own territories. The unity that once felt natural becomes something negotiated, fragile, and uncertain. As time goes on, people begin to speak differently about the empire. Some scholars and observers describe it as irregular, even dysfunctional. You hear criticism that it lacks what other states now consider essential. There is no strong central army that can respond quickly to threats. There is no unified treasury that can support decisive action. Decisions take time, often too much time, because they depend on agreement between many different interests. Inside the empire itself, divisions become harder to ignore. The Habsburg rulers who hold the imperial title are increasingly focused on strengthening their own hereditary lands in Austria, Bohemia, and Hungary. From your perspective, it begins to feel as if the emperor is no longer acting for the whole, but for his own dynasty first. At the same time, Prussia rises as a powerful force in the north. Its ambitions and its military strength create a second center of power within the German world. You begin to sense that loyalty is no longer simple. Some states look to Vienna, others look to Berlin. The idea of a single, shared political body becomes harder to hold together. It is not that the empire collapses in front of you. It is that it starts to lose its clarity. And perhaps the most unsettling part is this. The empire still exists. The institutions are still there. The language of unity is still spoken. But underneath it, the structure feels thinner than it once did, as if something essential has been slowly draining away, leaving behind a form that looks familiar, but no longer carries the same weight. At some point, the tension you have been feeling stops being quiet. It no longer sits beneath the surface. It arrives all at once, and it moves faster than anything the empire is used to. You begin to hear one name again and again: Napoleon. At first it sounds distant, like another general rising somewhere far to the west. But the stories change quickly. Victories come one after another. Armies move faster than expected. Old borders begin to feel less certain. And before you fully understand what is happening, the war is no longer far away from you. Then the news of Austerlitz reaches you. You hear that the combined forces of Austria and Russia have been defeated, not just pushed back, but decisively broken. It is difficult to grasp at first. The Habsburg Emperor, the very core of the empire's authority, has lost control of the battlefield. You start to realize that this is not another temporary setback. Something fundamental has shifted. If the emperor cannot win here, then what exactly is left of his power? What follows feels even more unsettling. It is not just defeat in war, it is what comes after. German states that once stood firmly within the empire begin to act differently. You hear that rulers in places like Bavaria and Württemberg are no longer looking to Vienna for protection. They begin to align themselves with Napoleon instead. One by one, they step away from the structure that has held them together for centuries. Not in rebellion, not in chaos, but in a quiet and deliberate shift of loyalty. Then comes the formation of the Confederation of the Rhine in 1806. You understand immediately what this means, even if no one says it directly. These states are no longer part of the empire in any real sense. They are now under the protection of Napoleon. The old bonds that connected them to the emperor are being cut, not by force alone, but by choice. Around you, the meaning of the empire starts to collapse. Not its memory, not its titles, but its function. The one promise that defined it begins to disappear. The empire can no longer protect its members. You feel that realization before you hear it spoken. And then, the pressure becomes impossible to ignore. Napoleon does not simply defeat armies. He reshapes the political order itself. There is an expectation now, clear and unavoidable, that the emperor must respond. But every option feels dangerous. To continue as before risks further humiliation. To resist may invite complete destruction. An ultimatum hangs over everything. By the summer of 1806, the situation reaches a point where there is no stable path forward. The empire still exists in name, but in reality, it has been hollowed out. Its most important members have left. Its authority is no longer recognized. Its ability to act has been stripped away. And then, on the 6th of August 1806, the final decision is made. Emperor Francis II does not lose a throne in battle. He does something far more final. He declares that the Holy Roman Empire itself no longer exists. He releases princes, electors, and officials from their obligations. He ends the structure that has defined your world for centuries. You are left standing in a moment that feels almost unreal. There is no great final battle in front of you. No single dramatic fall of a capital. Instead, there is a realization that settles in slowly and then all at once. The empire has not been overthrown. It has ended itself. At first, you think you must have misunderstood. The words are clear, but they do not feel real. You stand among others in Vienna, listening, watching, trying to make sense of what has just been announced. The empire, the thing that has always existed above everything else, is suddenly gone. Not defeated, not replaced, simply declared finished. And the silence that follows feels heavier than any battle you could imagine. Around you, people react in different ways. But none of them feel certain. Some are shocked into stillness. Others begin to whisper, questioning what they just heard, as if repeating it might somehow make it false. For many, it is easier to believe that this is a mistake, or a misunderstanding, or something temporary that will be corrected soon. An empire that has lasted for more than 1,000 years does not just disappear in a single morning. Your mind resists the idea. But the confusion does not fade. It grows. You begin to notice how deeply this change unsettles people. It is not only about politics or power. It feels like something more personal has been taken away. The empire was not always visible in daily life, but it was always there, shaping how people understood authority, order, and belonging. Without it, that structure becomes unclear. Among the nobility and diplomats, the reaction is more immediate and more painful. These are people whose identities and positions were tied directly to the empire. Some of them cannot hide their despair. You hear of officials who break down, who openly mourn what has been lost. For them, this is not an abstract shift. It is the collapse of a system that gave meaning to their roles and to the world they understood. In intellectual circles, the language becomes even more intense. Writers and thinkers search for comparisons that can capture the scale of what has happened. Some speak of the fall of ancient civilizations, of Troy, of moments when an entire cultural world seemed to vanish. Others frame it in darker terms, as if this is not just a political ending, but a sign of something deeper, something almost apocalyptic. The idea that a sacred imperial order could simply end raises unsettling questions about what, if anything, is truly permanent. You feel that uncertainty yourself, because what has ended is not only a political structure, it is a way of seeing the world. For as long as you can remember, there has been a sense that Europe was held together, however loosely, by something larger than individual states. Now that idea is gone, and nothing has clearly replaced it. In the streets, in conversations, in the quiet moments when people reflect on what they have lost, there is a shared feeling that is difficult to describe. It is not just grief, and not just fear. It is a kind of disorientation, as if the ground beneath everything has shifted. And as you try to understand it, one thought becomes harder to ignore. You are not just witnessing the end of a political entity, you are witnessing the end of a world that people believed would always exist. It takes a moment for the truth to fully settle in. You keep waiting for someone to say that the empire will return in another form, that a new emperor will be chosen, that this is only a pause in a long history that has survived far worse. But that moment never comes. Because what Francis II has done is not a temporary step. He has not stepped aside to let the system continue. He has brought the entire structure to an end. For the first time in your life, and in the lives of countless generations before you, there is no Holy Roman Empire. You begin to understand what that really means. There is no higher authority above the states of Europe in the way there once was. No shared imperial framework that binds hundreds of territories together under a single idea. The titles, the rituals, the language that once gave shape to political life across the continent no longer have the same foundation. In the years that follow, the change becomes even clearer. Europe moves into a new kind of order, one shaped by the power and influence of Napoleon. The map is reorganized not around an ancient imperial system, but around strategic interests, alliances, and control. The old balance that depended on negotiation within the empire is replaced by something more direct and more forceful. After Napoleon's fall, a new structure appears in Central Europe, with the German Confederation in 1815. It carries a faint echo of the old empire, a loose association of states rather than a single centralized power. But you can feel the difference. It is no longer grounded in the same universal idea. It is more limited, more cautious, and shaped by the realities of modern politics. At the same time, a new force begins to grow stronger. National identity starts to matter more than imperial belonging. People begin to think of themselves less as part of a broad, shared imperial order, and more as members of specific nations. In the German lands, this shift will eventually lead toward unification, but it also marks a clear break from the world you once knew. What disappears with the empire is not only its political structure. It is the idea that a diverse and fragmented Europe could be held together by law, by tradition, and by a shared sense of order, rather than constant competition between centralized states. And that leaves you with a quiet, difficult question. As you look at what comes next, at a Europe increasingly shaped by power, rivalry, and national ambition, you cannot help but wonder whether something valuable has been lost. The empire is gone, but the question it leaves behind does not disappear with it. For me, this story is not just about the end of an empire. It is about how a world can slowly lose its meaning before it finally disappears. I see the Holy Roman Empire as something fragile beneath its long history, not weak, but no longer fitting the time it lived in. I would really like to hear what you think about this moment. Was its fall inevitable? Or could it have survived? If you enjoy this kind of storytelling, consider subscribing to When History Broke and be part of the conversation.